comes out of here, right? Music has to live here before it can come out. And I won't get into the kind of neuroscience of it, which is kind of fascinating hearing a little bit, but the neuroscientists have found out, which is really the whole reason for mental practice, incidentally, that for our brains, there's actually no difference between imagining doing something, especially if we're realistic in our imagination of it, and actually doing it. There's actually no difference. For your brain, it is literally the same thing for you to imagine yourself up here playing whatever you're playing than to actually be doing it. So thus, music living a full life in our heads, and then it can come out, because I've actually done it a million times even before I set foot on stage. And my venerable colleague, Dr. Robert Rose, thinks slower, or listens slower. And we'll get to that one in a minute. A blank page. Now, here's the game. And it may be a little bit silly. I'll warn you about that. Kids, are you okay with silly? Yes. Okay, good. We're going to do our best as a group out loud to perform, if you will, the things that appear on the screen as they appear. So as soon as they see them, we'll just read them the best we can, and we're going to see what kind of performance we get here. Are you ready? Great, wonderful. Okay, here we go. I, L, O, beautiful, V, E, C, O, P, L, A, Y, M, U, S, I, C. Now, delightful, you all know your alphabet very well. How meaningful was that as a performance? It was a bunch of letters, and they were delightful letters. Game number 2. Same game. Now, here you may have to be a little bit bolder and just, say it however you see it, and we'll all kind of speak together. It'll be silly or not, and we'll kind of enjoy the performance. Here we go. Okay, great. Il. O. Vest. O. La. Mu. S. Ik. Another marvelous performance. If we think about, what did that sound like? Was that meaningful?
No.
I mean, maybe we could say that, not speaking letters, but now, if we play that back in our minds, well, maybe that was some bits of language that maybe meant something. Maybe I don't really know what those sounds meant or what language it was even in, but okay, there's some glimmer here. Game number 3. Okay, and this one, okay. Right, okay.
I love to play music.
Okay, same letters. All the games so far, right? Now that one meant something. We had understandable words, right? Now if we, instant replay, that performance, as it were, we understood the words. How meaningful was it?
Pretty.
I love to play. Game number 4.
I love to play music.
Okay, and so now we have something that carries really discernible meaning to it. Go back for a second. For some reason, that half boggles my mind and half doesn't. We all, when we play music, tend to be somewhere between game 1 and game 2. Think about that a second. When we play music, how many of us read letters on the staffs? I mean, this is of course where we all start. I think of my kids, Charles and Eloise, they're 6 and 8 now. At some point, we had to learn the letters. This was a necessary precursor. At some point, we're combining them into sounds. We're learning different letter combinations and sounds. And then, we get to a certain point, and then we're doing, for instance, sight words. Now I'm no longer thinking of those A's as C-A-T. I'm thinking that, well, that's cat. And I don't think of that as C-A-T anymore. And cat, and that has a certain meaning to it. And then I'm making that into sentences. that have meaning. Now, the part that half doesn't boggle my mind about, our struggles in music is because music is a very different language than English or another spoken language, in the sense that it is not immediately clear, or even, later clear all the time, what the words are, or what the sentences are. But nonetheless, I will suggest to all of you that our ears, regardless of the amount of musical education or training we've had, we can instantly distinguish between a performance that is letters, or game number 2, bits of words together, and one that has meaning. For instance, I'll steal a little bit of the thunder of the piece of music that, in our ambitious little game, I'm going to teach to everyone in this room. We're all going to learn it together mentally on our virtual pianos, a little bit like we did Mary Had a Little in a second. If, as in the first game that we played, one letter at a time, now this is from Mr. Mozart. We're already half asleep. It does not grab it doesn't mean, okay. If we fast forward to maybe some version of game 4, a sentence, the first sentence of this particular Mozart sonata that we'll learn in a second. Now, even if we can't explain in detail what it is we just heard, okay, so well, that's a little bit different, isn't it? It has a little bit more of a meaning to us. We would love to somehow proceed to that later stage of saying words in a sentence with music. How do we do that? Great question, so glad you asked. Especially if I love to play music. I want to talk about 2 aspects of musical learning, very briefly. One is the question of, well, okay, how do I understand what the words and the sentences are? Now, I'm not going to go super deep into this one, and part of the reason I chose Mr. Mozart is that maybe some of Mr. Mozart's words and sentences are more intuitive to us than, for instance, Shostakovich's words and sentences, like the music I played earlier. Nonetheless, Shostakovich does have words and sentences. But how do we understand, and I'm just going to scooch ahead for a second to this, which is what I just played for you, what we're going to learn together. How do I look at this? Think about this, young people. How do I look at this and I understand what the words and the sentences are? Maybe that sounded like a rhetorical question, but let's make it a not rhetorical question. Anybody have any ideas how I might understand? Are there things that I can see on the page, even without deep theory? Yes?
Tempo marking?
Okay, I can see something about the tempo marking allegro that requires a little bit of knowledge to know that basically means fast, maybe a lot of that, or it literally means happy in Italian. Maybe it's not the fastest tempo marking. Yes?
Phrasing?
Phrasing, now especially, do you mean like the slur markings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So I can see in some music we have these kind of things. And yes, young lady?
Key signature?
Key signature tells us something very important about which letters I have, actually. Especially if I'm reading letters together. Yes, young man?
Dynamics?
Dynamics tells me about the tone of voice I might be using here, which of course means something. Yes, young lady?
Different rhythms.
Okay, so I have to understand something about the notation. We'll get into that together in a second, the rhythms. Now, I can have rhythms of letters too, how am I forming these into words and sentences? Yes?
Chords?
Okay, so here's where we get into some particularly useful tools, being music theory, although I will say I played for a pretty notable jazz musician before I left New York in a lesson, and he shared his opinion with me was that music theory was a bunch of balderdash. And I appreciated his viewpoint because his whole thing was that we really need to approach this intuitively, which is kind of what we're going to do this morning. And he tried to get me to do it, but your brain is way too well trained. It's like a computer. I can't beat it. But it was literally a hindrance to me. But, it's not just music theory. If we have music theory, maybe I can see, for instance, that first bar, what chord is that?
G major.
Right, G major. Now that takes a little bit of training, but yes, those things do happen that way in tonal music. I have words, I have a D7 in different inversions and then another G major. How do I know where the end of the sentence is, for instance? Yes?
That's what I was thinking. Punctuation, the rest marks.
Okay, sometimes I have, especially if I see something like what maybe a melody in the right hand was kind of like more directly speaking, maybe I have rest marks to mark, well, maybe I finished and now I'm breathing. Okay, so do I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences on that line in the right hand?
Maybe they're commas.
Maybe they're commas. Other ideas about how we might recognize a sentence? Again, we're not going to bring this to its conclusion, but we're just kind of getting our brain juices flowing on this one. Sentences, question mark. Yes, young man?
Yeah, a change in dynamics.
Okay, so we might look at more big changes, like I might see those forte pianos there, which, while not being a dynamic proper, completely, okay. And for instance, I see that treble clef in the left hand. Okay, I'm changing register. Okay, what else changes in the last bar here compared to the previous?
There's no rest.
There's no rest in the right hand. Perhaps we've had short fragments until now. Does the rhythmic, yes, Emily?
It's not the same melody.
It's not the same melody anymore, right? Does the rhythmic pattern change in the last bar on the page? We no longer have the running eighth notes in the left hand, right? So we have a number of things changing, and if we listen again, for instance, even if I can't explain why that might be so, harmonically is some sort of idea, and so that maybe is a vote for certain understanding of tonal patterns. But somehow I can understand that that's one idea before things change. Okay, so this is our first step. And what I want to say here, especially for not having really focused on this to really gain really substantive tools about this, but I want to say to you about curiosity. Be curious about this music that can be so joyful. See these patterns. You can see, even the pattern in the bass here. It's a repeating pattern. And I have the rests, I have these kind of things. Be curious about those things. You don't have to be a master of music theory in order to know what the words and the sentences are. Any questions so far? Second aspect. Okay, I have some idea of what my words and sentences are. How do I teach myself to speak them meaningfully? Right? Even game number 3, I love to. I knew what those words were, but it wasn't yet meaningful. I love to play music. That says something to us. 2 principles, tools that I will outline for you that I use in teaching myself to speak words in sentences. Because as any person who studies music knows, all that information that we were just trying to parse through in that Mozart fragment that I showed you, there's some stuff to figure out in here, right? Now some of you may be advanced enough to just be able to sight read that, and that's really cool, if so. But, if we're like Emma, we're staring down 2 scary bars of that Rachmaninoff etude, and oh my goodness, those are some complex, like those big German words that have like 9 syllables. So those words I really need to figure out before I can just be like, gabalubadididi. Right? 2 tools that I use because I don't want to learn, again, back to the whole question of practice making permanent, I don't want to teach myself to say, ga-be-dee, boo-dee, boo-dee, even if that was literally the sounds of the word, because that doesn't mean anything. So, pause and slow-mo, like a DVD player. Babble, pause or slow-mo, babu. We understand if we're putting a DVD on slow-mo, they're not literally moving like that, are they? No, they're doing this. but it's in slow-mo. But, you know, I just need to learn because I don't want to default to saying letters instead of a real word. I want to teach myself, I want to give myself as many repetitions, even if it's slow-mo, of saying a word as part of a sentence. So I will pause when I realize that I don't know what word I'm saying or what happens next in the word, or I'll go in slow-mo if I realize that I have, you know, I really need to do that in order to say the word successfully as a word, especially if I'm near the beginning of my learning process. So here's the passage. Here's probably where we have the end of the first sentence. Here are my suggestions for the words that we're going to learn together in a minute. Now again, how did I choose these words? Take 10, 15 seconds and look at them, and especially young people, I want to challenge you. You know, how did I choose, you know, and you can see they're overlapping a little bit. The yellow word overlaps with the blue, then the green, and then the red. You can see I've very carefully not included the end of the fourth bar in the right hand. Take 10 seconds, and then I'll ask you why we might see the words this way. Thoughts? Yes, maybe.
Each section is like a different chord cluster.
Okay, so again, even if I don't know a technical label for that chord, that need not stop me from seeing that, especially in the left hand. Those patterns of repeating notes change by the time I get outside of the yellow word into the blue one. Excellent. Yes, young lady?
2 or 3 note groups with the rest in between them, so like each group with the rest in between them is
Right, so what we would see probably as the melody in the right hand, yeah, I have that repeating pattern of something and then a rest. Right? Any other observations about how I might see the words this way? Why do you think I overlapped them? Any guesses there? Young man?
because the pattern in the left hand sort of continues throughout it.
Right, and so, but why did I need to start the next word before that pattern changes?
Because the right hand.
Ah. Right, so again, curiosity. You know, but as this young man has perceptibly noted, even though my right hand, that second little tidbit, is starting a new thing, but the left hand pattern hasn't changed yet. How many of you are like, whoa? Raise your hands. I'll invite you to be open about that. It's good. What am I going to do in that situation? Sit and breathe a little bit. Maybe I'll listen to a performance of it, especially if I have no idea what that kind of music sounds like, you know. But again, I want to put in a vote here, especially given that practice makes permanent. I'm here to tell you that I get some doctoral students who are very talented. This is not a poor reflection on them, but they come in to see me and they've been playing that piece for 6 months. It's a hard piece.
Not that piece.
Not that piece.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about some other repertoire, some real humdingers type of pieces. And they've been working faithfully. The work ethic is not the problem. But they come in and they struggle to play it, and even given that, it's not very meaningful. Why does it take so long for us to learn, especially the more difficult repertoire? We'd like to be able to play it. These are very meaningful pieces of music. Why does it take so long, and why do we struggle so much? Well, because it doesn't matter how long I practice saying letters, I am still saying letters. Now somehow it seems like that's just kind of a natural thing to do, but you know, I think of my daughter Eloise. She stopped saying CIT at a certain point, right? It's a little bit less obvious in music. You know, this is a little bit to sort through. But I think if we really want to be successful and fluent for all the glory of the music, that at some point, as much as we're able, that we kind of face it a little bit. You know, that's why, incidentally, a quick, you know, practical note here. I'm very suspicious of young budding pianists who come and brag to me that they practice 10 hours a day. What are you doing for 10 hours? Are you doing this for 10 hours? Sure aren't. If you do this for 2 hours, don't you think you're going to be a little bit tired? If you're really learning and making changes, 2 hours is about as much as I can handle. That's, you know, even if we take good pro tips from Emma, we do little sessions, take breaks. Oh man. Oh man. Okay. I'll keep track of time here. We'll do an abridged version of this. We won't actually get to the point that we actually all perform on our virtual keyboards this whole first sentence of Mozart, because I'm seeing some, you know, which we could have done if we took an hour to do this. But I do want to leave some time for some questions and reflections before we have lunch at noon. So we'll just do a very small version of this. And I will say the next step about the rhythm is not one that I always do, because oftentimes the rhythm is not actually difficult for us, but I'm doing this here because I want to get as many people as possible on the same page with this piece. And because when the rhythm is not clear to us, or it's actually difficult or confusing, one of my hypotheses is that we're really best off learning the rhythm before we do any other aspect of the music. Otherwise, we're going to struggle inordinately with the words. We'll talk in a second about how this relates to the score that was just on screen. But here's the rhythm of the Mozart. Now, we'll do this, my turn, your turn. I'll do just the stuff that's yellow, and I'm going to use one of my tools, my pause button, before I get to the blue word, because I want to say things as words here. That's the whole point. I'm going to say, once I've kind of checked that out, I'm going to, in slow-mo, da-da-da-da-da-da. So, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Pause. Blue word. Processing. Ta-da-da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Red. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Okay, now we've all done the rhythm of the Mozart. Congratulations. Next step, because we just did words with pauses, use that pause button liberally. We'll use these tools liberally. My turn, your turn, the entire sentence, okay? Very good. You're doing great. One more step on that one. I have a little bit of spacing on the das. You'll also notice that some are capital and some are not. The capital ones are melodic. The lowercase ones are when only the accompaniment is speaking in the Mozart. And, you know, I'm giving a little bit of inflection to my rhythmic words now. Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
And as a sentence, first me. Da 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 da
Da da da da da da da da da da.
Very good. Now we have a rhythmic sentence of the Mozart that again has some sort of meaning to it. Here's how it relates. Again, capital D's where I have melodic notes. Lowercase d's where I have only accompaniment happening. In the case that I have both, it's capital. Let's imagine. Got our virtual keyboards here. You can use your knees if you like. Let's imagine where on the keyboard this is. So again, anybody in the room, if you know what a keyboard looks like, probably I have my pinky on that D in the right hand. Can I imagine that? Can I see, in between, my pinky in the right hand is in between that C sharp and that E flat. I have to have a good vision of my virtual keyboard. And then down here I've got my left hand. Now my left hand pinky on that G. And there's that F sharp and there's that A flat, so I've got that there. Okay, we've got our virtual keyboards. And we're going to teach ourselves how to perform the first word, the yellow word, stopping before the blue, of our musical sentence. Okay, so 2 or 3 seconds to get your virtual keyboards ready here. Hope you're all game for this. I feel myself on the keyboard before I start. And I want to orient myself. Is my pinky on that D in the right hand? My pinky on that G over there in the left hand? Okay, I can feel all the keys under all 10 fingers. Right? And now I want to kind of process that yellow thing as a word. If I only see that D in the first note, am I ready to start? That's just a letter. What word is that? Is it dibba? DB? No, it's ta ta da da da. We have an idea about it because we just did the rhythmic word. Okay. And I'll kind of demonstrate how this might go in my mind. Speaking out loud, even though in real life, if I were alone in a room, it would all be happening in here. I'll do it from your perspective. Maybe that'll be better. Ta da ti do di da. I'll do it again. I'm in slow-mo, right? I'm using the slow-mo tool, and I'm pausing before I get to the blue word, because I don't want to say that one until I know what that word is. Da 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 da. When I do this, I even think about performing a word as like putting a postcard in the mailbox. In the sense that as soon as I start that, I don't want to be, what's that? No, I don't want to, go after that postcard in the mailbox after I've mailed it. Even if I make a mistake on it, I don't want to just correct it. I can write a different postcard. Like I need to see that, that little B at the end there. I didn't see that before I started. Okay, I need to make sure I have all the information I need on this postcard. And then I try it again. So let's try this all together. 2 or 3 seconds again to get us settled on our virtual keyboards. Right? Can I feel where I am on my keyboard? You can do this here or as you like, totally in your head. And I'll lead this in this together a little bit. I'll suggest a certain slow-mo tempo that we're trying it in as a word. 3 seconds together to orient ourselves to that yellow word before we play it. And then we play da da dee da dee da. Let's keep our hands on the keyboard. Let's try it once more. And even once more, because this is probably foreign for a lot of us. What do we think? Are we getting some recognition of how to say that word on our virtual pianos? Some head nods. If I'm doing this for myself, I probably want to get really comfortable with that word before I proceed. Because, again, I'm kind of condensing my learning. That 6 months my doctoral students spent, I'm kind of taking all of that, and I'm kind of doing it right now. This is, I talked to the local music teachers about something related to this about a month ago, and someone observed afterward, this is really kind of countercultural in a way because we want instant gratification. This is basically the opposite of instant gratification. This is, pretty much taking a look at everything I'm going to need to learn to be able to perform that piece in real life and learning how to do it right now at the outset. Let's just do one more and then we'll transition to observations and questions because I want to have time for that. Let's do another very important step in this where I then attach two words together. Okay, 2 or 3 seconds to get our hands oriented on our virtual instruments. Where are my fingers? What notes are they over? I can feel that really nicely. Good. And 2 or 3 seconds to, again, what's that yellow word I'm going to say in slow-mo? And then before we proceed from our pause button at the end of the yellow word, I'm going to think of that blue word, and with my hands still on the keyboard, don't take them off afterward pausing the yellow word. They're still there, and from there, then I'm going to say the blue word when I'm ready. Okay, our hands are on our keyboard, and I'm thinking of that yellow word before I do it. And all together, da 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 da. Pause, hands on the keyboard. Left hand, third finger still has that B down. If not, put it back down. Because that's how we're going to start the blue word. Now I'm looking at that blue word from where I am. And I'm just seeing, okay, well, what's that going to be like to do that whole thing as a word? Until I get to the green box. I'm going to stop before the green box. Need to probably put my second finger over my thumb in the right hand to play that F sharp. My left hand's already where it needs to be. I'm still having my left hand third finger on that B at the end of the yellow word. And when I'm ready for that blue word, then I unpause. Ta-da-dee-da-da-da. Pause again. Now, a quick remark. Probably, if I were to poll you, our level of brain overload went up in that exercise. I am going to chill there in between those words on that pause as long as it takes for my brain to chill out before I proceed on. If I'm like this, I'm not going to be able to learn how to say that word. I need to get cool first. I'm going to literally sit there with my third finger at the end of that previous word for 90 seconds for me to chill out. I want to teach myself that, I'm just going to say that word. And then I'm going to say that word. This may feel really foreign to you, but you're going to get really good at it if you do it. To the point where you'll just be like, oh. You'll be able to basically play that in your head, hear it, feel it, without ever going near a piano. Horowitz learned his music at his country home where he did not have a piano. Draw some conclusions for me, if you would. Right? If Horowitz did it, and if I don't know that name, I'll go on YouTube later. What can we say about what we just learned about music? We'll just do 5 minutes, and then we probably have Kidogo outside. Marianne, is it out there, actually? Yeah. Okay, cool. This is my wife, Marianne. And Charles and Louise. A few reflections. Maybe you all have more. In music, I need to think or hear words. This is the slow listening, incidentally. If I'm thinking one thought for every letter, that's a lot of thinking. That's a really busy brain. That's a really hard performance. It's stressful. If I'm thinking in sentences, I'm actually going to hear slower. That whole first line of Mozart is one thing. I can practically drink a cup of coffee while I'm playing it because I already had the thought. I already know what it is. I already taught my brain and my hands how to say it. It's a delightful experience. And I'm saying it meaningfully because I've taught myself. I've made more permanent the act of saying something meaningful instead of just a packet of letters. Each word needs to include all the notes, rhythms, articulations, pedaling, and other deals for that span of time. It's a complete right because we use all these tools over here to perform these words, right? So even later on we would have needed to shift across the keyboard as part of some of these words. I need to have all those things before I start the word, because that's what the word is. In purple, where are the words? Can I find a single thought that I can mentally throw in the mailbox for each word? My words should make sense as part of the sentence. Game 3 was not yet meaningful, even though we all said, I love to play. We knew what those words were. Every word needs to get me to each next word. That's why I stayed where I was before I started the second word, the blue word, because I don't want to teach myself to play them separately, to speak them separately. They're part of a sentence. I probably need a practice step, which is the last thing we did right there, where I play neighboring words without stopping, or at least I can pause, in order to teach myself to do this. Obviously, I'll get to the point where I don't need to pause in order for my brain to be able to go from this word to this word. If my word doesn't work, and this is going to happen many times, change the word, don't think about letters. Let me do a quick demonstration. How many people have done that? Did I just teach myself something? Sure. What did I teach myself to do? That's what you just taught yourself to do. How do you teach yourself to do something different than the wrong note that you so desperately wanted to correct? Well, you have to see it before you start the word. What didn't work? How can I see what I need to before the beginning of the word? Does that modified word work when I perform it in my mind? I need to have the discipline not to correct or add to it. I think of it as putting band-aids sometimes as I play. Instead, I want to do a new performance of a slightly different word in order to fix things. In conclusion, am I playing letters? Quick questions, otherwise we can talk about our lunch too. Have any brave questions? Yes, you're not.
This might be pretty obvious. What would this apply to, not obviously not just piano, but it's all other.
This is how you think. I mean, music is a particularly involved coordination, right? Involves so many different parts of our brain, which is why this is, a little bit overwhelming maybe to conceive of doing. But yes, it applies absolutely to other things. I can't imagine that a basketball player wouldn't do this, imagining their free throws, So, I mean, this is basically based on true facts about how our brain works, how we think. Yeah. Great question. Yes, sir.
So you talked about playing slow-mo. Do you ever speed up so to get to the tempo?
Right. Basically, there's some art of practice in here. I always want to find my first step being something that I can process without being deer in headlights. Now, as I make that easier, I'm just going to be, cat. I don't need to cat. Once I know that word, I just cat. But I'm not, for instance, going to do this with the metronome in order to get me to go faster. I'm going to find out how to say that word easier, and then I'll naturally go faster. Because if I can't go faster, I think there's a problem with how I understand it, or at least how I know to perform it. It's a great question.
So the yellow and blue words overlap. Do you first practice the right-hand words and then go and practice the left-hand words?
Phenomenal question. Only as necessary is the answer I would give to that. Sometimes we have, again, this was not a humdinger piece. Sometimes I have pieces, it's just sort of like you look at a sea of black on the page, like on the side of Schmidt Music downtown, the Twin Cities, they have Gaspard Nui on the wall, if you've never seen it. As necessary, I will do that. The problem with that is that I never want to learn to do two things. My brain can't think of two things at the same time. It has to be one thing that I'm using two hands to do. Think of anything you use two hands to do. You practice the right-hand version of driving and then the left hand? Well, if it were really complicated, maybe you would. But only as necessary. As soon as I can envision it, I want to teach myself how to do this because, again, that's what I want to do here. That's what I want to learn how to teach myself to do to make more permanent as I do it. But it's a phenomenal question. I'll do that as necessary, basically.